What a treat today. I get to speak to Sangeeta Mulchandani. Lovely to see you today.
Thank you, Jeanette. So great to see you too.
How are you?
Yeah, really well, thanks.
You're well. I think last time we saw each other might have been at this LaunchVix Startup Gala. Is that right?
Yeah.
All dressed up, posing at the selfie booths.
The fanciest event of the year in the startup world.
Because we don't actually get other Christmas parties like we do in the corporate world, right? So that's right.
It's true. And I think, when you're in startups, you're just always dressed casually, pretty much. Like even work days are casual. Yes. So that's one night that you get dressed formally and present yourself in front of everyone.
It's nice of them to give us an excuse to get dressed up.
That's true.
But I do remember, and I wonder if this is the same for you, back in my corporate days, I used to be all about pencil skirts and cufflinks and kind of the striped shirts with the white collars and stilettos. Was this the same for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say shirts for me, but yeah, absolutely. Like it was dresses. And I can tell you a funny story. So one of the first roles that I did in my corporate jobs was an agribusiness banker. And so I was thrown into the deep end. I was living in Shepparton, which is about 2 hours north of Melbourne. Mm-hmm. It's a country town. And the first day I got there, my job was to go visit farmers on the farm. And I pretty much rocked up in heels and a short skirt.
I'm sure they were thrilled to see you coming.
Oh my God. They were thrilled to see me, but by the time I got home, my shoes were all muddy and dirty. My dress is all like literally. And the last thing my boss said to me when he dropped me home that evening was, he said, "Get some gumboots."
For the next agribusiness visit.
Get some gumboots and pants. That's all you'll need for the next 6 months here. I'm like, okay, boss. Got it.
Oh, that's so funny. And the things that we learn, right? And I guess I brought that up because we actually share a common corporate background. So before becoming entrepreneurs, we worked at banks, at ANZ. Mm-hmm. You worked at EY and other things. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, tell me a bit how you went from that corporate lifestyle to what you're doing today, which is running your own business.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting story. So I'm a third generation entrepreneur. Both my parents are entrepreneurs, my grandparents are entrepreneurs. So I sort of grew up with entrepreneurship in the blood, like they say. So every night the dinner table discussion was business. It was about customers, was about suppliers, was about pricing and, costs and things like that. So I learned a lot of that at the dinner table. But I suppose I was the first in my family to go to a corporate job. And I think for me, that journey was really exciting because I hadn't seen anybody else do it. So it's a new challenge. It's a new way of doing things. And that was exciting for me. And when I sort of went through that whole corporate lifestyle, somewhere in the back of my head, I sort of knew I'm going to go back to business and entrepreneurship one day. But I think for me, the biggest barrier was I didn't know how. I didn't know because I was in Australia, a very different country from where I had grown up. And to me, it was always about, I know how to do business in India, but I don't know how to do business in Australia. So I probably need to learn this. And so for me, the whole switch, I suppose, happened when I was comfortably climbing the corporate ladder. I was getting the roles that I wanted. I was getting paid really well. Everything was mapping out and I still wasn't happy. I'd wake up every day feeling like there's more to life. There's more that I can do. And, just something wasn't working out. And so initially I thought maybe it's Melbourne, and I need to get out of Melbourne. I just need to go
Surely
explore.
not. Can't possibly be Melbourne.
It can't, right? But I don't know. At that point in time, it was just like, maybe I'm just in one place. I'm just an adventurous spirit. And I love exploring new places and new languages and new cuisines and things like that. So I spent a year traveling around the world and trying to figure myself out. And then a year later, I came back to Melbourne and I'm like, no, I really love Melbourne. I love this place. So it's not Melbourne. And then I realized it's probably my work. Because as I was traveling as well, I was still continuing my job. So I still had my banking job as I was traveling the world. So I came back and then I was again unhappy in like a few months' time. And so I thought, you know what, I just need a break from the work that I'm doing maybe. And maybe I just need to do something else. And so I guess that's where it all started.
Yes, that sort of creeping sense of dissatisfaction. Yeah. And I think I can definitely relate to that whole, there's got to be something more.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm happy, this is fine. And by outside perspectives, everything's great. But
yeah.
when you know something's not quite right for yourself.
Yeah, I know. It comes from the gut.
It does. And I kind of love that you went and tried a few different things and went traveling and adventuring and then came back to it and go, nope, this is it. This is the thing I need to change.
Yeah.
And so it's a big step to take from going from that well-paid, comfortable career to starting Jumpstart Studios in 2021. Tell us, what did you specifically do to kind of get from A to B? I know you didn't go from banking to Jumpstart. You had a bit of a journey in between. So talk us through that journey a bit.
Yeah, sure. So this was 2018 when I decided I just needed to do something different. And so in 2019, I decided to take a career break and spend the whole year doing something that I love doing. And that was the agenda. But as I was leaving the corporate job, and a person like me can't sit still, like I really need to do something. And I think for me, one of the biggest values is learning and learning new things. I love learning new things. And so I decided to go do my master's degree. And this was my second master's degree, and it was 10 years after my first one. And so it was a little bit daunting, but I said, you know what, I really want to do this. And so usually after spending a lot of time in the corporate career, people choose to go do an executive MBA or something like that to sort of further their career. But I think for me, the entrepreneurial itch had already started. So I was looking for something that would put me on the path to entrepreneurship. And so I scouted around a little bit, and I was very lucky to find a course called the Masters of Entrepreneurship at the University of Melbourne. And this course, the promise of this course was by the time you graduate, it was a 1-year course, and by the time you graduate, you will have a business. And so
that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, that really excited me. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like that's something that will be worth doing. And if I do not like the business pathway, I always have a master's degree. Right?
That's right. And you can apply that back to any kind of career, right? Because entrepreneurial skills, and I say this to anyone who'll listen, are fully transferable across 100%. Any profession. Yeah. And I have to say, this concept of taking a year to do something and try different things, it seems to be quite common in entrepreneurs, especially those making a transition. I mean, I personally took about 3.5 months off and just explored for a long time. And it sounds like you did something similar. Can I take you specifically to Jumpstart Studio? So now that you are running this business, can you tell us exactly what it does in a nutshell? How does it work?
Yeah, so Jumpstart Studio basically was born during COVID, and we were all locked down in our homes. And during that time, I decided, you know what, I'm just quitting my corporate job for good.
It's time for a change.
Time for a change. Yes. But because my businesses were closed as well, my startups, I think for me it was at that time, so what do I do? Right. And I think my third business, which was my consulting business, started during that time when I was mentoring somebody pro bono. And during COVID, after a few months, he was like, I want to pay you. He's a lawyer. He's a very successful lawyer. And I was coaching him on, business mindset and social media and things like that. And he said, I want to pay you. I said, really? I don't even know what I'll charge you because I've never done consulting as a business before. And he said, well, I was like, what would you pay me? And he mentioned an amount. I upped him 30%. He said yes. And I said, done. Let's do it.
Sure. Why not?
Why not?
And so this was the seed of Jumpstart Studios, being paid to mentor and consult to somebody and then suddenly realizing, I think more people might want this.
Sort of. So that's where it's sort of the consulting piece started. But also I started doing a lot of pro bono work with universities. And a lot of universities here in Melbourne have activator programs or have incubator programs, accelerator programs that you can be part of and you can mentor. And because I came from a corporate background, and also I had startup experience, I could bring both to support startups and startup founders and sort of add both those lenses in what they were trying to do. And I found that very exciting. I found it really fulfilling, helping other people and seeing other people succeed. So my definition of success changed. It was no longer about me. It was about helping other people succeed. And that made me feel successful.
And that's certainly where I know you from, in the ecosystem, supporting lots of other entrepreneurs and helping to amplify their voices and their confidence, which is so amazing. Yeah. Can you take me into like a day in the life at Jumpstart Studios right now? What kind of client might you work with? What kind of projects might you deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jumpstart Studio started because a lot of people started asking me, hey, Sangeeta, how did you make the leap from employment to entrepreneurship?
Just like I'm asking you right now.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. I would love to work with you, right? And so that's where the seed started for Jumpstart Studios. Like there's more people like me who don't like what they do in their day jobs perhaps, or are just looking for a change or looking for something different. And there's no pathway for them. There's no avenue for them to get out there and start something. And it does take a little bit to transition from, spending 10, 15 years in a corporate lifestyle to then transitioning to an entrepreneurial lifestyle. There's a mindset change. There's a lifestyle change. There are so many things around you that need to be shifted. And for a lot of people, that's daunting. And so that was the problem statement, I suppose, that Jumpstart Studio was built on. And as part of that, what really happened then is I decided to write a book. So when I established Jumpstart Studio, I started talking a lot about this transition between employment to entrepreneurship. I had a lot of people who were interested, but I don't think anybody really was willing to pay me yet. And so I needed to find that business model for the business that would work. I also decided to write a book. My book's called Start Right, How to Pick a Winning Business Idea and Make It Successful. And this book was really written targeted to people who are aspiring founders.
Yes.
And so once I wrote that book, it helped me then find a lot of people who were keen to work with me, who wanted me to help them make that transition. And this is where now Jumpstart Studio has transitioned over the last 2 to 3 years, where now we design and deliver startup programs. So initially it was a lot of one-on-one work, but now I run programs. We do this for government organizations and we do this for universities. So that's the day-to-day of what we do, is design programs and run them and deliver them. We also have 2 flagship programs. One is Press Play Ventures, which is about helping women transition from employment to entrepreneurship, which is also, again, a pre-accelerator. So, again, aimed at that very early stage aspiring founders. And the other program is the Overseas Accelerator program, where we're now expanding Jumpstart Studio into India and helping startups in India develop a global mindset and understand how the global landscape works.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So in a nutshell, I'm going to summarize. Let me know if I got this right. So Jumpstart Studios, your problem statement is all about helping people make that transition from maybe corporate or something else into the life of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And you do that through amazing programs like the Overseas Accelerator, like Press Play Ventures, and by running programs for government and unis.
Yes.
Fantastic. I can see so much demand for that, especially with the increasing trend of people being curious about what a life of entrepreneurship might look like. Do you think that there's a difference between small business entrepreneurship and startup entrepreneurship? And do you kind of draw, do you draw those lines for yourself or for your clients?
Yeah, 100%. So because I grew up in a business family, I've seen business the traditional way. Both my mom and dad are business people. They had their own empires. My mom built her empire and then sold it and exited very successfully.
Oh, how inspiring.
So having seen those traditional businesses, what I learned when I got into entrepreneurship here was how to do it the startup way. And the startup way, I suppose, comes a lot from the Silicon Valley and comes a lot from, how businesses have built themselves up in the Silicon Valley. And it's quite different because with a small business, it is about profit and loss. It's about, creating a business that is sustainable and longer term. Don't get me wrong, it's the same for startups as well. You have to create a profit. You have to be sustainable. The difference, though, is that startups need to scale, and they need to scale rapidly, because the purpose of a startup is to create a change and create a change at a global level, at a much higher level than a normal small business would.
Yes.
Both have their place in society and both have their way of doing things. But the reality is that for startups, that scaling piece is the most important differentiator.
Yes, and I think it's so interesting also that risk-return mindset. You mentioned that before when it comes to making transitions and choices of what your career is going to be next. Now, for right now, when you think about coming back to Melbourne and starting your business in Melbourne or your multiple businesses, can you tell me a bit about how perhaps the tapestry and the network and the multicultural element of this city has really contributed to what you're now building?
Yeah, 100%. When I moved to Melbourne in 2009, and I think the first thing that struck me is this is like a mini world fair. There's just people here from everywhere in the world. There's just so many, like in Melbourne, we speak about 260 languages and dialects. Like there's just that kind of multiculturalism is quite rare in other cities. Sure, some cities in the world have it, but, with Melbourne, the speciality is that, the multiculturalism is really thriving. And
do you think that brings other resources do you think that makes more, words. Do you think that multicultural aspect means that there's more resources for people to tap into in the city?
Yeah, 100%. And I think as people move here from different countries, they bring their culture with them. They bring that richness of everything. And you see that sort of starting to blend. It becomes a melting pot of cultures. It becomes a melting pot of traditions, of, people doing things in different ways. And people learn from each other. And so there's such a wide variety of ways that you can do things in Melbourne, because different communities have different needs and the way you serve them can be quite different. But at the same time, you're building a business that's quite unique.
Lots of opportunity, right?
A lot of opportunity.
And for somebody who might be new to Melbourne, or maybe they're a recent migrant and looking to start business, how might they tap into some of those opportunities? Where do they find the right people to talk to?
Come talk to us, Jumpstart Studio.
Good start.
But I think there's heaps of opportunities. I think the government here, especially in Victoria, does a lot for the migrants and for the multicultural people. And so things like the State Library of Victoria, for example, or, if you go into City of Melbourne, they've got programs that they run. The universities here run different kinds of programs. There are multiple community groups that are very specific to particular cultures, but then again, there are these ones that bring many cultures together as well. So there's multiple different ways that you can get involved, and just finding the right sort of people that, are doing the things that you want to do, I think is the first step. Just going into places where these people hang out and, observing them, talking to them, I think influences you quite a bit. And then you can start taking your first steps from there.
Totally agree. Just keep showing up, right? Now, earlier in the conversation, you said that your first few businesses helped you learn a lot about yourself and that entrepreneurs should continuously learn and reflect on themselves. Could I ask you to share with us a couple of the things that you might have learned about yourself that might help other people on a journey?
One of the things that I learned through that business really deeply was, it's not about your passions. It's about your drivers behind those passions. Understanding what ticks you. And for me, I think what ticked me along, or what really excites me about travel, is that I get to learn, and I get to learn new things. I get to meet new people. I get to explore things that are outside of my wheelhouse, and I get to feel a little bit of that fear and still do it anyway. And I think those are things that really excite me. That's the stuff I'm passionate about. And I learn, and the newness of it all, just new things all the time. And so I suppose when I learned that about myself, with what I do now at Jumpstart Studio, I think, that's perfect, because I get to work with about 200 different startups and founders and businesses every year, which means I get to see a variety of, different things that people are doing. I get a chance to be involved in a variety of things that people are doing. I get to learn all the time, because as I'm building out my business, I'm helping other people build out theirs. And so I get to learn back from them.
It's a real iterative process, right? I really like that tip that you just mentioned. So you might have a passion for something, but it actually is good for us to interrogate what's going on underneath that passion. So it might not just be what you think it is on the surface. There's a deeper drive.
Absolutely.
And those things that you mentioned, meeting people, being challenged, learning new things, all of that really underpins Jumpstart Studios and your mission today. So it makes perfect sense. As opposed to just like, travel's fun, let's do travel. Can I ask you, even though you're no longer doing travel specifically, you are doing overseas accelerator programs and things like that. And to me, that really talks about that sort of bilateral opportunity, cross-border opportunity. Can you talk to me about how your Indian heritage has helped you think about that global perspective and maybe the opportunities between countries like Australia and India?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in India for 20 years, and then I moved out, right? So I spent a good 20 years in India, and the remaining 20 years now I've spent across many different continents. So I've lived and worked on 6 continents. I've had quite a global kind of career, working in different countries, working in different parts of the world. And I suppose all of that really adds to the way I bring and I talk about business. And I think for me here, especially in Melbourne, there are not many people like me doing what I do. And I think that really adds that lens of, I'm Indian, I've got a global mindset, I've lived and worked in different countries, and I'm educating startups on how to build startups. And so there's not many people like me that look like me.
Pretty unique combination.
That look like me, that talk like me, that, do this. And so for people who are from an Indian background get quite attracted to that, because they can see, they can relate to who I am. People who have a global mindset or who love traveling and, who've been out there and adventured a little bit outside, they can relate to what I'm saying. Women relate to what I'm saying. People who want to, transition from corporate to entrepreneurship relate to what I'm saying. So I've created points of relatability on many different angles. So my heritage acts as that anchor point, and then it's everything else beyond that. Like, it's my experiences, it's what I bring to the table. I think all of that adds to how people can relate with me, and this is why I can work in multiple different ways 100%. With the government, with universities, with other countries. So that, I think, has been really, really valuable.
I think the way that you phrased that for the listeners is incredible, because you've really just taken all of those parts of your identity and individually found the value and how can they add to your business so that 1 + 1 = 3, right? All together.
Yeah.
The combination of that is really, really special and unique for Jumpstart. Yeah. Now, one part of that identity is that you are a woman.
Yes.
And you're an Indian woman.
Yeah.
And I know that Press Play Ventures is one of your passion projects, your flagship programs where you work specifically with women. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about do you have any tips specifically for women or for women of colour in a male-dominated space that you would like to impart on our listeners?
So many, so many. A few tips, I suppose. The first thing will be to stop playing by the rules.
Oh, nice.
The rules were not made for you. They were not made by you. They were made by other people way before you, and you've got to stop playing by those rules because they don't apply to you. A lot of what entrepreneurship is about is finding your own path and finding your own way of doing things. And I think one of the best things I've learned through my entrepreneurial journey is really that everything is made up. Right? Everything is made up, right? From money to businesses, to names of businesses, all of that is made up. And I think for the longest time, I felt like, the world was a certain way because this is how it's built. But the reality is we're all building it together all the time. And so just realizing that can really help you break out of this loop and this fear of, oh my God, am I doing it right? Yeah, right. And so I think that's really one thing that I tell my women founders that I work with all the time. Like, nothing is real. You can do whatever you like.
Everything is a construct.
Everything is a construct. And people have built this. It's all created. And you can create it too. You can create whatever you wish to create.
This is part of why I actually became an entrepreneur personally, because I felt that same pull of I'm operating in a structure that I didn't build for myself. I didn't create it. And I don't believe necessarily in the values that were running it. Yeah. And so part of my driver personally was to say, I want to build a business the way that I want to build it, treating people the way I treat them. And I actually really agree with you. Things like jargon, which are all constructs, are just amazing ways to gatekeep capital and opportunities from people from diverse education backgrounds, diverse upbringing backgrounds. So we could talk about this for hours. Yes. But I'm very curious about what is next for Jumpstart Studios. What are you excited about for the future?
I think for me, Jumpstart Studio, over the years, I've really figured out where I work well. A lot of it is in this programming space and really helping like a bunch of founders, these group programs where people come together, find their tribe. I really find joy in doing that sort of stuff. And I feel like there's a need for it, not just here in Australia, but across the world. So for me, Jumpstart Studio was always built with a global mindset. It started here. It will always remain and be headquartered here in Melbourne. But I think for me, what I see over the next 10 years is the world's going to have a massive shift in the way things work. And for me, I feel like India, UAE, and Africa are going to be the next big ones, big markets for Australian startups and Australian entrepreneurs to explore. A lot of Australian entrepreneurs tend to start here and then look at US as their next big market. But the reality is, if you're ignoring this side of the world, the next 10 years belong to this side of the world. They belong to India, they belong to UAE and to Africa. And there's a lot of work going on in these regions to really, uplift the whole region. And this is the right time to be playing in these places. And so the corridor I want to build, and I want to help Australian founders find that corridor between Australia, India, UAE, and Africa, and the other way around as well. Bring founders from those regions into Australia because Australia has so much to offer as a market as well.
Amazing growth markets, huge populations, lots of growth potential when it comes to getting people online. 100%. The talent there is incredible. Yes. So I think it's a really exciting vision that you have for Jumpstart.
Yeah, and the reality is they're hungry.
Yes.
Right? People in this region are hungry. They're hungry for that growth, and their disposable incomes are just growing day by day. So there's an opportunity to really engage them with new technology, with new things that you're building, new things that you're bringing to the market.
And it's really also about sort of myth busting that there's only one or two markets that Australian founders can go into,
100%.
And shining a light and really, making people understand the opportunities they could be missing. So I love that you're focusing there. I'm sure that you'll have plenty of entrepreneurs wanting to work with you to access the insights, talent, capital in those markets, and the other way around.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Sangeeta, thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to watch you go truly, truly global.
Thanks, Jeanette.